Welcome to the morning roundup. So I want to start with a visual for you today. If you've ever driven down like a really long stretch of highway in the dead of summer, you've probably seen
Oh
this.
yeah, the heat waves.
Right. You look a mile down the road, and there, shimmering right on the asphalt, is this massive puddle of water.
Yep.
And it looks perfectly real. I mean, you can almost see the reflection of the sky in it. But as you keep driving, as you get closer to where that water should be, it just vanishes.
Completely disappears.
It was never there at all. It's just a mirage.
Yeah, and it's purely an optical phenomenon, right? Because the hot air near that dark asphalt, it bends the light from the sky upward.
Uh-huh.
And your brain, which is, constantly trying to make sense of incomplete visual data,
Yeah.
it interprets that shimmering blue light on the ground as water.
Right, because your brain knows that water reflects the sky. It's taking a cognitive shortcut.
Exactly. It's an efficient assumption.
But so, what happens when that same phenomenon, that tendency of the brain to just fill in the blanks with whatever makes the most sense, or honestly whatever it desperately wants, to see what happens when that happens not on a hot highway, but in our digital lives?
Ooh. Yeah, that is the question.
Right. Like, what happens when we are so overwhelmed by the sheer heat and friction of modern information that our brains just start projecting pools of water that simply don't exist?
Well, we end up living in a landscape of illusions, and honestly, that is exactly what we are navigating today.
Yeah, we really are.
So for today's deep dive, we are pulling together this massive stack of source material. I mean, we are covering everything from artificial intelligence and macroeconomic theory to internet conspiracies, cold fusion,
Yes, mythology.
yes, Norse mythology, and even local political ground games.
It's a huge stack today.
It is. But the thread connecting all of this for you today is humanity's desperate search for truth and authenticity in a world where the mirages are just getting harder and harder to distinguish from reality.
Yeah, we are looking at a society that is clinging to narratives just to cope with it all.
Right?
And sometimes those narratives are grounded and ancient, and, sometimes they're entirely fabricated defense mechanisms against a shifting culture.
100%.
So we are going to unpack the mechanics of these illusions today. And just a heads up for you listening, diving into the actual machinery of why we believe what we believe, especially regarding stuff like politics and theology, it can be uncomfortable.
It definitely can.
Yeah, it might push your buttons, it might challenge how you view your own convictions, but, exploring that discomfort is exactly why we do this show.
That's the whole point.
So let's jump right in. Let's start with the ultimate mirage we are currently grappling with, which is our relationship with technology.
Yeah, and the recent wave of college graduations offers a perfect case study for this.
Oh man, these graduations were wild.
They really were.
Yeah.
We had this fascinating juxtaposition over the span of just a few days. So you had these tech executives, specifically former Google CEO Eric Schmidt at the University of Arizona,
Right.
and Scott Borchetta, the CEO of Big Machine Records at Middle Tennessee State University.
Yeah, the music guy.
Right. They were giving commencement addresses,
Mhm. and
both of them heavily focused their speeches on artificial intelligence.
hmm
And both of them were met with just aggressive, sustained booing from the graduating classes.
I mean, Borchetta literally told a stadium full of aspiring music industry professionals that AI is rewriting production and they just need to, quote, deal with it.
Yeah, not the best phrasing.
Which went over about as well as you'd expect, right? Just absolute chorus of boos.
Exactly.
But then, on the exact same weekend, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, speaks at Grand Valley State University.
Yep.
And he talks about AI too, but the crowd goes wild. They applaud him. So my initial thought looking at this is, well, maybe Wozniak is just a more charismatic speaker, Like, maybe he just knows how to read a room better than the other guys.
Sure. I mean, it's tempting to chalk it up to just public speaking skills.
Yeah.
But the analysis from our source today, House of L, it points to a much deeper structural issue here.
Okay, lay it out.
The students booing Schmidt and Borchetta, they were not actually booing the underlying code of a large language model.
Right, they aren't mad at the Python script.
Exactly.
Right.
They were reacting to a brutal, overwhelming macroeconomic reality that they are stepping into. You have to look at the economic environment right now. The 30-year U.S. Treasury yield has been hovering around 5.2%.
Which is high.
Very high. Inflation remains incredibly stubborn. And youth unemployment, specifically for recent college graduates, is sitting at 5.6%.
Okay, let's slow down and connect those economic dots for you guys listening because it's so easy to just throw out percentages without really understanding the weight of them.
Right.
When the Treasury yield is at 5.2%, that means the cost of borrowing money is really high.
Yes.
The era of, like, free money, that zero interest rate policy that completely defined the 2010s, that is over.
Completely over. And that fundamentally changes corporate behavior.
How so?
Well, think about it. For a decade, companies could borrow money for almost nothing.
Right. Capital was cheap.
Exactly. So they use that cheap capital to fund massive speculative projects and to hire enormous cohorts of entry-level employees. They built pipelines.
Yeah, they could afford to just hire a 22-year-old right out of college, train them up for 2 years, and just kind of see if they pan out.
Right. It was low risk. But now, capital is expensive. Companies are in hardcore cost-cutting mode. The entry-level pipeline is being actively dismantled.
So when major corporations say, hey, we are replacing these early career roles with AI,
Yes.
AI is actually acting as a really convenient scapegoat for a financial contraction that was going to happen anyway.
Because of the cost of capital.
Yes. The AI isn't the primary driver of the job loss. The Treasury yield is.
Exactly. But living in the nuance of a complex macroeconomic environment is just exhausting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, try holding all of those variables in your head at once for you personally. Sovereign debt, inflation metrics, corporate bond yields, global supply chains.
It's too much.
The human brain cannot easily process that level of systemic complexity. So just like seeing the Mirage on the highway, like you mentioned earlier,
Right.
the brain takes a heuristic shortcut. It collapses all of this complex structural anxiety into a single binary narrative, a villain they can point a finger at.
AI is the enemy.
Exactly.
I see it now. It's like we are treating AI as a societal stress ball.
That's a great way to put it.
Because you can't boo inflation, you know? You can't go to a protest against the 30-year U.S. Treasury yield.
Right. It's an invisible force.
But you can absolutely boo a billionaire tech CEO standing at a podium telling you to deal with it.
You can. And going back to Wozniak, he avoided the boos because he didn't deliver a top-down mandate about economic inevitability.
What did he do differently?
He spoke to the human element. He pulled back the curtain on the technology itself. He accurately described deep learning as merely an attempt to duplicate a human routine 1 trillion times over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He reminded the audience that AI is just a mirror of biological cognition. It's a synthetic attempt to replicate the human brain's neural networks.
So by framing it that way, he validated the human original over the digital copy.
Yes. He made the technology subordinate to humanity rather than the other way around.
And our source points out a deeply ironic twist here, right, regarding how our brains function compared to the AI we are so terrified of.
Oh, the irony is profound. The very reason we hate nuance, the reason we crave simple binary narratives like AI is good or AI is bad, is driven by the exact same cognitive limitations that make AI necessary to build in the first place.
Wait, explain that.
Well, our biological processing power is finite. We use heuristics to conserve energy. We literally build supercomputers to process billions of data points, to model a nonlinear global economy, or to map a complex protein sequence.
Specifically because our biological brains cannot handle that load.
Exactly. Yet that very biological limitation, our inability to hold contradictory, complex ideas simultaneously without suffering cognitive fatigue, is what drives us into these tribal camps where we just want a simple enemy to yell at.
So we demand black and white narratives because the gray area is physically and emotionally exhausting.
You nailed it.
And man, when you want to talk about retreating from the exhausting gray area into absolute cartoonish absurdity.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
We have to look at the CIA mass conspiracy.
Yes.
We are pulling this from the Asmongold source today. This blew up the internet recently, and it is just a fascinating case study in how hyperskepticism manifests.
It perfectly illustrates the psychological defense mechanisms we use when the world feels unmanageable.
Okay, so here's the setup for you if you missed this online. Robert Harward, who is a highly decorated former military general, he is doing a standard interview on Fox News about geopolitical tensions with Iran. He's in a studio, or maybe it was a remote head, I'm not sure. But the lighting is incredibly harsh. top-down lighting.
Very unflattering lighting.
Yeah. And as he speaks, the shadows fall really heavily along his jawline and his neck. And almost instantly, this viral conspiracy theory births itself on social media.
Out of nowhere.
People start claiming that the man on television is not the real General Harward, but a body double wearing an elaborate Mission Impossible-style CIA rubber mask.
I mean, it sounds like a joke.
Right. But this wasn't just a fringe joke. It gained massive, massive traction.
It did. And the source even ran the high-definition images and video through advanced AI analysis tools programs like Grok and Gemini.
And what did the AI say?
It confirmed exactly what any video producer would tell you. The effect was entirely due to heavy digital camera processing, compression artifacts, and harsh directional lighting, creating a hard shadow line.
The software literally analyzed the pixels and said, hey guys, this is just lighting and camera compression.
Yeah.
Yet thousands of comments poured in, completely rejecting the analysis.
Completely ignoring it.
People were drawing red circles around his neck on MS Paint or whatever, insisting the gig was up, telling him to take the mask off.
Yeah.
Why does someone look at a logical explanation, like bad lighting, and choose to believe a 3-star general is literally a man in a rubber suit?
Well, to understand that, you really have to connect it back to the anxiety we just discussed with the graduates.
Okay.
When people feel completely alienated from the macro world, when the economic system feels rigged, when entry-level jobs are disappearing, when geopolitical conflicts feel endless and arbitrary, they experience a profound loss of agency.
They feel powerless.
Exactly. So they retreat into a state of hyperskepticism as a survival tactic. The logic basically goes like this. If the invisible systems governing my life are a lie, maybe the visible world is a lie too.
Oh, wow. So believing in the mask is actually strangely comforting to them.
Paradoxically, yes. Because think about the alternative. If the world is just chaotic, poorly lit, and run by flawed humans making mistakes.
You are helpless.
Right. But if the world is controlled by a shadowy cabal using literal rubber masks, well, then there is a secret order to the universe. Believing in the conspiracy restores this bizarre sense of control because you have positioned yourself as the enlightened observer who has uncovered the secret truth that the rest of the sheep are too blind to see.
It elevates your status in your own mind.
Precisely.
It's a way of feeling smart in a world that constantly makes you feel small. That is wild.
It really is.
And, it isn't just the digital or political realms where we see this desperate need for illusions. We see it happening at the absolute highest levels of academia and venture capital, too.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at the eternal mirage of cold fusion.
Yes. Brought to us by the physicist Sabine Hossenfelder in our sources today.
Right. So cold fusion, which is often rebranded today to sound more scientific as low-energy nuclear reactions, or LENR, it is essentially the holy grail of physics and energy production.
If it's real.
Right. The premise is that you can generate the power of a star, literal nuclear fusion, at roughly room temperature, or at least just a few hundred degrees.
Rather than the millions of degrees required by traditional massive fusion reactors like the ITER project in France.
Exactly. So if it works, it solves the global energy crisis overnight. Clean, limitless energy for everyone.
And because of that massive promise, millions of dollars are pouring into a new wave of startups right now.
Oh, a ton of money.
We are talking about companies like Clean Planet in Japan, Prometheus in Italy, ENG8 in Ireland. Venture capitalists and even the U.S. government and the European Union are throwing literal fortunes at this research.
They are, but Hossenfelder's analysis completely deconstructs the illusion here.
Okay, break it down for us.
She provides a really rigorous look at the underlying mechanics of what these LNR startups are actually building. So the core technology usually involves pumping hydrogen gas, or its isotope deuterium, into a thin lattice structure made of metals like nickel or palladium.
Right.
Now, hydrogen is the smallest chemical element, right? And it naturally wants to embed itself into the microscopic gaps within these metal lattices.
Okay, so you are basically forcing gas into a piece of metal. What happens next?
Well, when you force the hydrogen in, and when it inevitably releases, the interaction alters the energetic properties of the metal.
Right.
The electron shells compress and interact, creating friction at an atomic level. And this process releases heat.
Makes sense. Friction equals heat.
Exactly. So the startups measure this heat output, which sometimes appears slightly higher than the energy they put into the system to run the experiment in the first place.
And they say, boom, we did it.
Right. They declare, we have achieved cold fusion. Look at this excess heat.
But the critical distinction Hossenfelder makes is about the type of heat.
Yes. This is chemical heat. It is not nuclear heat.
And that is a huge difference.
It is the dividing line between reality and the mirage. If a genuine nuclear fusion reaction were taking place, like if atomic nuclei were actually fusing together to form heavier elements, there would be undeniable, detectable byproducts.
Like what?
The most obvious of which would be high-energy neutrons. You cannot have fusion without radiation. It's a package deal.
And these devices?
These LENR devices do not produce neutrons. They do not produce gamma rays. They are effectively highly complex, incredibly expensive chemical hand warmers.
Just really expensive hand warmers.
Yep.
So if it's just chemical friction, why do the sensors sometimes show excess energy? Like, how are they tricking the investors if the math doesn't add up?
Well, it often comes down to imprecise measurement, specifically a field called calorimetry, which is notoriously difficult to get right.
Okay.
When you heat these metal lattices, the materials themselves can warp, they can melt, or change their thermal conductivity. The thermocouple, the sensors measuring the temperature, they can shift position or degrade during the experiment.
So the math gets muddy.
Exactly. They calculate the input energy and the output heat. The numbers look slightly anomalous, and they jump straight to the conclusion of nuclear fusion rather than recognizing a mundane error in their thermodynamic calculations.
And the phrase Hassenfelder uses is that these claims register as a, quote, 10 out of 10 on the bullshit meter.
Yeah, she doesn't hold back.
Not at all. Yet, brilliant people with PhDs and millions of dollars in venture capital still fall for it. It just boggles the mind. Why do smart people fall for this?
It is the scientific manifestation of the God of the Gaps phenomenon.
Okay.
Unpack that. So in theology, that term refers to pointing to gaps in scientific knowledge and saying, well, that's where God is.
Right.
In this context, it's the miracle of the gaps. The physics of quantum materials and lattice defects are incredibly dense, complex, and difficult to calculate perfectly. So because there's a tiny microscopic gap in our understanding of these thermal anomalies, people project their deepest, most desperate desires right into that gap.
Wow. We want a reality that defies the hard, unforgiving limits of thermodynamics.
We do.
Just like the college grads want a reality where their jobs aren't threatened by macroeconomic forces. And the internet commenters want a reality where world events are controlled by movie villain masks.
Yes. We want infinite clean energy to save the world from climate change and geopolitical resource wars. So we choose to believe the illusion, even when the physics loudly declare it impossible.
It really is profound.
It is.
Because our digital environments, our political discourse, and even our intellectual pursuits are just so saturated with these mirages and manipulations. Human beings are experiencing a sort of vertigo right now.
Yeah, we're dizzy.
We are desperately trying to find an anchor. We are reaching for the physical, tangible world to ground us, which perfectly brings us to the importance of physical media and memory.
This is a critical pivot in our understanding of how we cope. We are pulling insights from the Fourth Age source today, which provides an incredible look at the relationship between human cognition and the medium through which we consume information.
Right. So the source discusses the vital importance of physical media. We're talking books you can hold, DVDs you can put on a shelf, vinyl records.
Yep.
And it correlates this to public education data over the last century. For decades, starting in the late 1800s and moving through the 20th century, public education metrics generally showed a steady upward trend.
Kids were getting smarter.
Or at least they were absorbing and retaining more complex information generation after generation.
Right.
But when we look at Gen Z, the data shows a stark plateau, followed by an actual decline in the ability to deeply absorb and retain information.
And the causal link the source explores is the widespread introduction of digital screen-based learning as the primary instrument of education. We replace the physical textbook with the tab.
And see, I would normally think a tablet is better. I mean, it has infinite information, hyperlinks, videos. Why would that cause a decline in retention?
It comes down to how the human brain encodes memory. The brain treats digital information as fundamentally ephemeral.
Ephemeral.
Yeah. Think about the physical act of reading a screen. You scroll, you swipe, the text disappears. It is quite literally just patterns of light that vanish the moment you close the app or lose power.
Right.
Because a digital file lacks an objective physical existence outside the device, the brain's spatial memory system doesn't fully engage.
It doesn't map it.
Exactly. It subconsciously categorizes the information as here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, why expend the metabolic energy to deeply memorize something that exists purely in a fluid digital state?
Oh, that makes so much sense. And contrast that with a physical book, When a student holds a heavy textbook, the brain recognizes that the information has an anchor in reality.
Yes, it has a spatial location.
Right. You remember that a specific fact was on the bottom left of a page halfway through the book. The information exists independently of a Wi-Fi connection, or a battery charge, or a software update.
And that tactile physical anchoring aids the hippocampus in forming long-term memories, logical associations, and critical thinking pathways.
That is fascinating.
Furthermore, the source ties this back to the preservation of history and culture itself.
Yeah, because when information is entirely digital, it is inherently mutable. It can be changed without a trace.
Exactly.
Yes, the source gives this chilling example regarding the movie The French Connection. Classic 1971 film.
Great movie.
Recently, a preservation institute digitally altered the movie for modern streaming platforms. They actually censored and removed a specific scene that contained offensive dialogue.
Wow.
But from a storytelling perspective, that specific scene provided the primary psychological motivation for the main character's actions throughout the rest of the film.
So they broke the story.
Yes. If you only watch that movie on a digital streaming service today, you are watching a rewritten, sanitized version of history. The original context is gone. The only definitive proof of the original artistic intent is the physical DVD or VHS tape sitting on someone's shelf.
And if we look at this through the lens of philosophy, the Force links this digital mutability to concepts found in postmodernism and critical theory.
Okay, how so?
Well, these frameworks often suggest that objective truth is an illusion and that reality is just a series of fluid narratives constructed by those in power.
Right.
If everything you consume is a fluid digital narrative stored on a corporate server, then reality itself can be quietly rewritten overnight.
Which turns the simple act of owning a physical book or a DVD into an act of defiance.
It really does.
The bookshelf becomes a rebel base. It's a statement that reality is objective, that history happened a certain way, and that it is not subject to the shifting political or digital whims of the present moment.
We anchor to the physical to protect our sanity. But, as with everything involving human behavior, there's a paradox here.
Always a paradox.
Sometimes the physical world is the very thing preventing us from achieving authentic connection.
Ooh, yes. We see this contradiction clearly in the Paul van der Klee source discussing internet intimacy versus real-world status.
Yes.
This blew my mind. We literally just spent 20 minutes establishing that the digital world is ephemeral, manipulative, and full of mirages.
We did.
Yet, van der Klee points out a phenomenon where this ephemeral digital space is currently providing better, more profound pastoral care and emotional support than many physical, real-world community centers or churches.
It seems entirely counterintuitive until you look at the sociology of physical communities.
Okay, walk us through that.
Real-life physical groups are heavily built on status hierarchies. Consider a traditional church congregation or a tight-knit neighborhood association or even just a corporate office.
Sure.
In those physical spaces, you generally gain social capital and status by projecting stability. You are rewarded for not having problems.
You want to be perceived as the reliable spouse, the excellent parent, the morally upright citizen.
Exactly. So if you are struggling, if your marriage is falling apart, if you are battling an addiction, if you are having severe doubts about your faith or your life choices, admitting that in a physical community carries an enormous risk.
Right. To be vulnerable is to actively lower your social status.
The cost of admission for help in the physical world is your reputation.
Wow.
Therefore, the survival instinct kicks in. People put on a brave face, they smile, they say everything is fine, and as a result, no one is truly vulnerable.
So the physical community becomes superficial.
Exactly, and profound healing cannot take place.
But the screen changes the equation entirely.
It does. The digital world offers a false intimacy. It provides absolute anonymity.
Right. You can log into a forum or watch a YouTube video and speak your mind from the safety of a pseudonym.
You don't have to look anyone in the eye. You don't risk your real-world reputation at all.
And that removal of social risk allows the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, to just relax.
Yes. That safety allows for radical vulnerability. People will pour out their deepest traumas and confess their darkest secrets to a digital avatar because the social stakes are zero.
We literally have to put on digital masks to take off our real-world masks.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
Yes. We use the illusion of the internet to bypass our sociological programming and reveal our most authentic selves.
It highlights a tragic flaw in how human beings naturally organize. We desperately crave authenticity, but our evolutionary drive to maintain social status prevents us from achieving it in person.
And speaking of our deep, inherent flaws, nothing shatters our illusions of control and status quite like the ultimate physical reality check.
Belief.
Let's talk about grief. We are pulling from the geeky Stoics analysis of a pivotal scene in the anime Full Metal Alchemist.
This is a beautiful, devastating illustration of human limitation.
It really is. So for those who don't watch it, the show features a character named Colonel Roy Mustang. He is a state alchemist whose specific power is the manipulation of fire.
Right.
He is incredibly powerful, composed, deeply respected, and feared by his enemies. But his entire ability relies on generating sparks and controlling flame. Therefore, when it rains, he is completely, utterly useless. The water neutralizes him.
He goes from being a battlefield god to being completely powerless.
Exactly. And the source analyzes the scene of the funeral for his best friend, Ma Hughes, who has been murdered.
Such a sad scene.
It is. Mustang is standing by the grave after everyone else has left. He's a man who relies on total control, but right now he is weeping, yet he refuses to admit it.
Right. He looks up and blames the weather.
He says, quote, "It's a terrible day for rain." And his lieutenant, who is standing right next to him under a totally clear sky, says, "But it's not raining."
And Mustang replies, "Yes, it is."
It is a profound meditation on helplessness.
It really is. Grief teaches us the brutal lesson that we are not the masters of our universe. You can be the most powerful, composed, high-status person in your community, but your will can be completely overridden by the physical reality of death.
Or by another person's choice to abandon you.
Yes. Grief obstructs us. It is the rain that puts out our fire. It violently interrupts the illusion that we are in control of our destiny.
And the geeky Stoic source connects this anime scene to the writings of the philosopher and theologian C.S. Lewis.
A great connection.
Lewis wrote extensively about pain, calling it God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world.
Yes.
Lewis argued that pain shatters the illusion that all is well, and more importantly, it shatters the illusion that what we have, our own strength, our own intellect, is enough for us.
We spend our lives building these fortresses of autonomy. We want to believe we can conquer grief through logic or therapy or distraction, almost like a military campaign.
Right.
But as the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca suggested centuries ago, you cannot deceive grief. You cannot rebrand it, and you cannot outrun it.
You simply have to carry it.
Exactly. The inescapable physical reality of loss forces us out of our manufactured narratives of control and drops us right back into the raw, uncomfortable authenticity of our own limits.
It forces us to stop resisting and actually admit that we are broken.
Yeah.
Which raises a massive question for you as the listener. If grief and cognitive limitations and this desperate need to protect our social status are so deeply baked into our physical reality, where did this flaw come from?
Have we always been this fundamentally broken?
Right. This leads us into our next major theme today, the narratives we inherit. The theological, historical, and cultural stories that try to explain our condition.
And there is no older narrative for explaining human brokenness than the concept of original sin.
We are sourcing this from a deeply theological discussion on the Your Calvinist platform today, examining the mechanics of inherited guilt.
Yes. So the hosts of that source are locked in a debate about a very specific question regarding the Genesis narrative. When Adam fell in the Garden of Eden, did the rest of humanity simply inherit mortality, meaning our bodies wear out and die? Or did we inherit actual legal guilt and a corrupted, inherently sinful nature?
That's a heavy distinction.
It is. And to understand the debate, we have to look under the hood of two historical theological frameworks: seminal headship versus federal headship.
Okay, let's define those.
Seminal headship is essentially a biological argument. It posits that all of humanity was literally biologically present in the seed of Adam.
Right.
Therefore, when Adam sinned, human nature itself was corrupted at the root. We inherit the corrupted nature genetically, much like inheriting a predisposition to a disease.
Okay, but federal headship, which is the position the speakers in the source actually rigorously defend, that operates on a legal framework rather than a biological one, right?
Exactly. It argues that Adam was appointed as the legal representative or the federal head of humanity.
Kind of like how a president can declare war and the citizens who never voted for that specific war still suffer the consequences of the treaty.
Perfect analogy. Adam represented us. He failed. Therefore, his guilt is legally imputed or credited to our account.
And the source offers a very relatable anecdotal piece of evidence for this inherited corruption, regardless of the exact mechanism.
Yes, they point to toddlers.
Which is so true. Anyone who has ever raised a child knows that you do not have to teach a toddler to disobey.
You really don't.
You don't have to teach them to be selfish or to hit their sibling. Mine and no are among their very first concepts.
Parents spend 2 decades trying to socialize them and teach them the opposite behavior. The argument is that this natural inclination toward rebellion must be an inherited condition.
I hear that, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this is where modern sensibilities aggressively push back against this narrative.
Go for it.
If I am a citizen today, I might say, wait a minute, I wasn't in the garden, I didn't eat the fruit. Why am I footing the bill for a crime committed thousands of years before I even existed?
It feels unfair.
Right. Representation without my direct consent feels inherently unjust. Why should I be legally guilty?
That is the exact tension the source addresses, and they answer it by pointing to the structural integrity of the entire Christian narrative.
Okay, how does that work?
In the theology of the Apostle Paul, particularly in his letter to the Romans, the entire system of salvation is built on this exact concept of legal representation.
It is a package deal.
Exactly. If you deny that Adam has the right to legally represent you in the fall and impute his guilt to you, you destroy the mechanism by which Christ can legally represent you in salvation.
Because if the rule is every person stands completely on their own individual merit with no representative head,
Then Jesus dying on the cross cannot legally apply to your account either.
wow.
Romans chapter 5 explicitly parallels the two. By one man's transgression, death and condemnation spread to all men, and by one man's act of righteousness, justification and life are offered to all.
And the source also points out that this legal framework is why the doctrine of the virgin birth is considered absolutely cardinal in Orthodox Christianity, right?
For Jesus to be the perfect substitute, he had to be born outside of the normal biological lineage of Adam. He had to bypass the inheritance of that corrupted nature to serve as a new Adam, totally untainted and able to perfectly fulfill the law on behalf of humanity.
So whether you listening personally agree with the theology or not, you have to acknowledge the brilliant interlocking architectural integrity of that overarching narrative.
You really do.
It explains the flaw, provides the legal mechanism for the problem, and uses that exact same legal mechanism for the solution.
It's totally cohesive.
But what happens when modern society tries to rip that architecture apart? What happens when you try to keep the moral outcomes of that narrative while entirely discarding the theological foundation?
Oh, things get messy.
That brings us to the dilemma of the liberal materialist. We are pulling this from the second Paul Vanderklay source today.
Yes. Vanderklay references a brilliant observation by the historian Angela Tilby. She describes modern secular humanism as a good Christian heresy.
A good Christian heresy. That is such a loaded, fascinating phrase.
It gets right to the heart of the modern cultural condition. Tilby observes that secular humanists have systematically dismissed all the supernatural and doctrinal aspects of Christianity.
Right. They reject the miracles, the virgin birth, resurrection, the divine authority.
But simultaneously, they desperately try to hold on to the ethical and communal fruits of that religion.
And the source points to prominent modern thinkers, evolutionary biologists like Brett Weinstein, or humanist historians like Bart Ehrman, as prime examples of this cognitive dissonance.
Yes, these are men who operate from a strictly materialist Darwinian worldview. They believe the universe is purely matter, driven by unguided evolutionary processes.
Let's look at the mechanics of that Darwinian worldview for a second. At its core, natural selection is a brutal, unforgiving mechanism.
It is the survival of the fittest.
Right. It is a world where organisms compete for scarce resources, the strong dominate, and the wolves eat the weak. Any trait that does not contribute to passing on genetic material is ruthlessly pruned from the gene pool.
That's the science.
But despite fully knowing and teaching that scientific reality, Weinstein and Ehrman champion what Vanderklay calls the generous Jesus ethic.
They advocate for universal human rights. They argue that we have a moral obligation to care for the sick, to protect the marginalized, to sacrifice our own resources for the weakest members of society.
The contradiction is glaring.
It really is. They are attempting to live inside a moral narrative, protect the weak that their own foundational scientific reality actively punishes.
Because if human history is nothing more than the story of evolutionary winners maximizing their reproductive success,
Then sacrificing your own resources for a genetically unrelated, weak individual is mathematically counterproductive. It makes no sense in a purely materialist universe.
The argument is that they are living on borrowed capital. They want the shade of the tree, compassion, charity, human rights, but they have taken an axe to the root that produced it.
They treat the overarching story as a fairy tale, but it's a fairy tale they desperately require to be true in order to prevent society from descending into brutal tribalism.
And this intense psychological need for grand, redemptive narratives isn't just an anomaly of the Christian West.
No, it appears to be hardwired into the human psyche across time and geography.
We see this clearly when we introduce the J. Dyer source today, which analyzes Norse mythology.
This is where the comparative mythology gets wild.
It really does. Dyer provides a deep dive into the Poetic Edda and other ancient Norse texts, and the parallels to biblical narratives are just impossible to ignore.
It demonstrates how different cultures encode similar fundamental truths about human existence.
Exactly. Look at the Norse creation myth. The universe begins in a formless, chaotic void called Ginnungagap.
Which instantly mirrors the opening lines of Genesis, where the earth was formless and void before creation.
Right. Then, the Norse gods kill a primordial giant named Ymir, and the sheer volume of his blood causes a catastrophic global flood that drowns almost all the frost giants.
But one giant, Bergelmir, builds an ark, a wooden boat, and survives the deluge with his wife to repopulate their race.
I mean, the mechanics of that story are literally just Noah's Ark with snow.
It's the exact same structure.
And the parallels extend perfectly into their eschatology, too, their vision of the end of the world, Ragnarok.
Yes. During the final battle, Thor, who is the son of the Allfather, Odin, engages in mortal combat with Jormungandr, the massive Midgard serpent that encircles the world.
Right.
Thor strikes the serpent and crushes its head, but in doing so, he is poisoned by the serpent's venom. He takes 9 steps and dies, sacrificing his own life to defeat the beast.
Which is a direct beat-for-beat parallel to the messianic prophecy in Genesis 3, where God tells the serpent that the seed of the woman will crush his head, but the serpent will strike his heel.
It is the archetype of the divine son sacrificing himself to defeat the ultimate draconic evil.
Now, Dyer makes a crucial point here. Pointing out these parallels isn't about claiming that all religions are just the exact same story, or that one merely plagiarized the other.
No, it reveals something structural about human consciousness.
Humanity has a perennial, hardwired appetite for cycles of redemption.
Yes. We inherently understand concepts of primal chaos, corruption that requires a flood to cleanse, and the necessity of a heroic sacrifice to restore order. We are creatures built for narrative.
Which makes the final source in this section feel like a cultural tragedy.
It really does.
We are looking at a discussion between Matt Fradd and the poet Malcolm Guite about the intentional destruction of these narratives. They call it the theft of our stories.
Guite focuses on the intellectual movement of the 19th and 20th centuries, specifically the philosophers Paul Ricoeur labeled the masters of suspicion.
We are talking about Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and Friedrich Nietzsche.
Right. These thinkers instituted what Guite calls a hermeneutics of suspicion.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
They trained the modern intellectual class to look at all these grand meta-narratives, whether it's the Christian epic, the Norse myths, or even the Enlightenment ideals of objective reason, and unmask them, to approach them purely with cynicism.
So you never take a story at face value.
Exactly. A myth is never actually about heroism or divine truth. For Marx, it's always secretly about class struggle and economic control.
For Freud, it's about repressed psychological trauma.
And for Nietzsche, it is fundamentally about the will to power. They taught us to view every human interaction, every piece of art, every theology, solely as an invisible mechanism where an oppressor is trying to subjugate the oppressed.
Now, we have to admit, narratives have absolutely been abused to maintain power throughout history. That is a fact.
Of course.
But what Greed is arguing is that by applying this cynical deconstruction to everything, we didn't just fix the abuses, we destroyed the overarching story that gave human life coherence.
We completely dismantled it.
We dismantled the engine to figure out how the power dynamics worked, and now we're sitting in the driveway with a pile of greasy parts, and we don't have a vehicle to drive anywhere.
That's a great analogy. The philosopher George Steiner had a brilliant metaphor for this resulting condition, too.
What was it?
He said that without a shared meta-narrative, human beings become like walled cities, isolated in the concavity of our own skulls.
Man.
We have no shared language of meaning. All we can do is lob verbal grenades over the barricades at each other.
We traded cohesive generational epics for fragmented 15-second TikTok clips.
We did.
But here is the catch. Just because you deconstruct the grand narrative, it doesn't mean people stop needing stories. The appetite is still there.
Precisely. Nature abhors a vacuum.
So what happens?
When the grand unifying stories collapse, the human need for belonging and narrative meaning simply fractures. People retreat into micro-narratives.
Right.
They latch onto political tribalism, pop culture fandoms, and highly specific cultural identities with terrifying ferocity, because that is literally all they have left to anchor themselves.
Which brings us to the collision point of our modern world, the battleground of cultural identity and politics.
Yes.
And as we dive into these final sources, we are going to look at how these fragmented narratives actually fight for dominance in the real world.
Let's start with the pushback against modern media, using the Akkad Daily source focused on movies.
Okay, and just as a quick reminder to you listening, we are analyzing the mechanics of these culture wars as presented in the sources today. We aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoint. We are just looking under the hood.
Right, so this source is analyzing a reaction to a piece published in the Mirage, which is a progressive pop culture outlet.
Yep.
The original article was criticizing a trend among audiences celebrating classic films that happen to feature zero female speaking roles.
They specifically pointed to John Carpenter's sci-fi horror, The Thing, the historical epic Lawrence of Arabia, and the naval drama Master and Commander.
Classic movies.
Great movies. But the implication of the article was that the modern celebration of these films is rooted in a desire to exclude women.
But the source we are analyzing completely rejects that premise.
Right. The host argues that audiences aren't flocking to Master and Commander because of misogyny. They are flocking to it because it is an oasis.
And we have to ask, an oasis from what?
Exactly.
The source argues that modern audiences are experiencing severe narrative fatigue. There is a pervasive feeling that the entertainment industry right now is no longer focused on organic storytelling.
Instead, movies and shows feel like they're reverse engineered from an HR department checklist.
Right. Audiences feel that diversity and heavy-handed political messaging are being aggressively shoehorned into scripts at the expense of narrative logic and character development.
When the grand narratives are gone, every piece of pop culture becomes a proxy war for political ideology.
It really does. People retreat to a movie from 1982 or 2003 because they want to experience a story that doesn't feel like a thinly veiled lecture from a modern sociology professor.
They are seeking out older physical media, connecting right back to our earlier point about the DVD shelf to escape the hyper-politicized environment of the present.
It is fundamentally a battle over identity and who gets to define it.
And the mechanics of how identity is formed is the core of our next source, Richard IV.
This source tackles the concept of identity head-on, arguing forcefully against the modern globalist idea that identity is entirely fluid, interchangeable, or based merely on geography.
The speaker uses a very direct example. A European who moves to Japan, learns the language, and lives there for 20 years does not magically become fundamentally Japanese.
The core of their argument is that true identity is deeply, inextricably rooted in heritage, blood, shared historical struggle, and spirit. It cannot be swapped out like a SIM card in a phone.
Right. But the most insightful part of this source isn't just the definition of identity, it's the political strategy they derive from it.
Yes. The speaker quotes the famous author Dale Carnegie, who said, "When dealing with people, remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but creatures of emotion."
Which explains why so many political debates go absolutely nowhere.
You cannot win a cultural movement just by handing someone a spreadsheet of economic data or a list of logical fallacies.
Exactly. The source argues that if a political movement, particularly conservative or traditionalist movements, trying to build a counter-narrative to liberal hegemony, wants to actually persuade people and win, they have to stop relying solely on debate logic.
They must offer something artistic, something spiritual, something the speaker describes as life-giving.
Because, as we established with the Norse myths earlier, humans are narrative creatures. You have to give them a song, a poem, a cohesive story that speaks to the soul.
A political movement that only deconstructs the opponent's logic will fail because it doesn't feed the human need for emotional resonance and belonging.
But building that cohesive emotional narrative within a political movement is incredibly volatile.
Oh, extremely. Which leads us to the concept of the purity spiral, highlighted brilliantly in the debate sourced from the Crucible.
This was a fierce, live debate between two individuals over an author named Rachel Wilson and her controversial book, Occult Feminism.
And it serves as a perfect microcosm for how these fragmented tribes police their own borders.
Right, because in this debate, the critic is attacking the author not necessarily from the left, but from within her own broader ideological sphere.
The critic argues that Wilson is inauthentic and actively harmful to the movement.
And what's the reasoning?
Her writing style is too dense, too analytical, and far too uncompromising. The critic claims that by refusing to soften her rhetoric, Wilson is alienating the exact demographic they need to convert moderate, slightly left-leaning women who are disillusioned with modern feminism.
Furthermore, the critic accuses her of lacking analytical purity because she allegedly ignores the specific historical roots of cultural Marxism in her critique of feminist history.
So the critic is saying, you are too extreme for the normies, but not analytically pure enough for the hardcore base.
But the defender on the other side of the debate flips that entirely. The defender argues that Wilson's raw, unapologetic, abrasive honesty is the exact proof of her authenticity.
Yes. The defender points out the flaw in the critic's strategy. If you dilute your message to make it palatable to the moderate masses, you essentially destroy the core truth of what you are trying to say.
You become just another manufactured political product.
Exactly. And the defender brings the receipts, noting that Wilson's uncompromising approach is exactly what allowed her to break through the noise and reach massive platforms, including Joe Rogan's audience.
Who responded precisely because she didn't sound like a focus-grouped politician.
Right. It is the ultimate strategic dilemma for any movement trying to build a narrative. Do you water down your message to build a massive, broad coalition?
Or do you stand your ground, maintain absolute ideological purity, and accept that you will remain a smaller, alienated faction?
Sociologists call this a purity spiral.
A purity spiral.
Yeah. When a society lacks a unifying meta-narrative, the subgroups fight relentlessly over the exact boundaries of their micronarratives.
The purity spiral demands that anyone who deviates even slightly from the in-group's orthodoxy is declared a traitor, often pursued with more vitriol than the actual political opposition.
It's vicious.
And this incredible collision of fragmented narratives, psychological illusions, and the desperate search for tangible reality, it culminates perfectly in our final source today.
We are looking at the mechanics of a literal, physical ground war in politics. The UK by-election in Makerfield, analyzed by Akkad Daly.
This source takes every abstract concept we have discussed today, data manipulation, the desire to control outcomes, the need for physical anchoring, and applies it to a local election.
It's a three-way race between the establishment Labour Party, the Populist Reform UK Party, and a smaller grassroots faction called Restore Britain.
And the entire battle hinges on the illusion of data.
A major mainstream polling company releases a poll claiming that Labour is sitting at 43%, Reform is at 40%, and Restore Britain is trailing massively at a mere 7%.
The narrative that the media and the larger parties instantly push is, this is a two-horse race. A vote for Restore Britain is a wasted vote. You must vote tactically for reform to stop Labour.
But the source, speaking from the perspective of Restore Britain, completely rejects the digital top-down narrative of that poll.
They argue that the polling methodology is flawed or intentionally skewed.
Instead, they point to their own internal physical data. They have volunteers manually knocking on thousands of doors.
And their grassroots canvassing shows a completely different reality. Restore Britain is actually polling 24% of the vote, with massive numbers of voters still genuinely undecided.
The host of the source argues that the mainstream poll isn't just a miscalculation. It is an active psychological weapon.
It is an illusion designed to manipulate behavior.
It's a dirty trick meant to trigger the voter's anxiety. If you convince a voter that their preferred candidate has no chance, they will abandon their authentic preference and vote tactically out of fear of the worst-case scenario.
The poll creates a self-fulfilling prophecy by manufacturing the illusion of inevitability.
And how does the grassroots campaign combat this digital psychological weapon? They return to the physical world.
The source insists that the only way to pierce the illusion of the digital poll is to physically walk the streets, knock on wooden doors, look actual human beings in the eye on their front porches, and collect grounded, tangible data.
We are seeing the absolute culmination of everything we've talked about.
The polling data is the mirage on the highway.
Yes.
The narrative of inevitability is a manufactured mechanism of control. And the only defense against the mirage is physical action in the physical world.
If we synthesize this massive stack of sources today, the diagnostic picture of our society is incredibly clear.
It is.
From the graduates collapsing macroeconomic anxiety into a hatred of AI, to people soothing their geopolitical fears with CIA rubber mask conspiracies.
To investors chasing the thermodynamic illusion of cold fusion.
We are swimming in a sea of manipulated narratives. We allowed the hermeneutics of suspicion to deconstruct our grand stories, our myths, and our theological anchors.
And instead of becoming enlightened, free individuals, we replace those epics with digital tribalism, political purity spirals, and algorithms that literally profit off our cognitive fatigue.
Our only defense, our only path back to sanity and authenticity is anchoring ourselves to physical realities.
We must hold on to physical media to ensure our history isn't rewritten by a server update.
We must allow for the physical vulnerability of real-world relationships and the brutal reality of grief to remind us of our human limits.
And we must recognize the deep emotional narratives that drive our identities rather than just reacting to the mirages placed in front of us. And that brings us to the most important part of the show. We never want to leave you with just an hour of heavy philosophy without a way to apply it.
Right.
Based on the deep dive today, here are some actionable steps you can take to start piercing the illusions in your own life. First, find a way to anchor yourself in the physical this week.
Don't just order something online.
Go to a local thrift store, a used bookshop, or a record store. Find one physical copy of a book, a movie, or an album that fundamentally matters to your identity. Buy it, take it out of the cloud, and put it on a physical shelf in your home. Give the things you value an objective existence.
Second, take a hard look at your own anxieties. Look at whatever issue is making you intensely angry right now, whether that is a technological shift like AI or a political faction across the aisle.
Ask yourself honestly, are you mad at the actual structural root cause, or are you just falling for a mirage?
Are you yelling at a CIA mask because it's an easier, more visible target than the complex, exhausting reality?
Challenge your own worldview and make sure you are spending your energy on the right battle. Finally, you have to practice finding the gray area.
We know the brain wants the lazy, binary choice of black and white, but truth almost always lives in the complex nuance.
Sometime today, read an article or watch a video from a primary source that you fundamentally, deeply disagree with. And here's the rule. Don't do it just to mentally dunk on them or to write a snarky comment.
Do it to genuinely understand the emotional narrative they're living inside.
Try to see them as a complicated human being, not just a digital avatar of the enemy.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Hit us.
We talked extensively about the philosophers of suspicion, the thinkers who taught us that every myth, every theology, and every story is secretly just a mechanism for power and oppression.
Right.
If we assume they are right, if every narrative is truly just a calculated power grab, then what power is someone trying to grab over you right now by trying to convince you that your history, your grief, and your physical identity are just fluid illusions?
Wow, that is the question of the decade. Keep that in mind the next time you are staring at a screen. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. As always, we strongly encourage you to check out the original sources linked in the show notes. We want you to explore these topics, read the physics papers, look at the theology, and dissect the political strategies for yourself. We are just here to help guide the conversation. The actual journey is yours to take. If this show challenged you or helped you see the matrix a little more clearly, please like, subscribe, and share this show with someone who needs to hear it. Because if we are going to navigate through all of these mirages, we are going to need all the authentic, physical connections we can get. We will see you next time.